I would like to start this event thanking to all people, greeting my colleagues from the project, of course, and sending you a warm regard, a meaningful thank you for coming to Porto. I hope you enjoy your stay. I would like to tell you something about the persons I invited. Dr. Liliana, as I said, is the representative of the International Relations Office. She will talk about the Erasmus mobilities and the importance of the Erasmus on the creation of the European identity. We have Professor Dr. Angela Becker from DHBW Karlsruhe, coordinator of the project UCAB, as you know. Lieutenant Commander Cortes Sanches, distinguished on the role of Battle Watch Captain on the Force Headquarters of European Union Naval Force, Operation Atlanta. And since 2018, he works at the Plans and Policy Division in the Portuguese Naval Staff. I think it's the correct. Dr. Jaime Quesado, economist and author of the book My Europe, and Dr. Luísa Alves, senior lecturer at SCAP, lawyer with a diploma of Advanced European Studies. Her current research topics include access to justice, language rights, and language policy of the European Union. Welcome and thank you for accepting my invitation. And as you know, over the last decades, identity has been a widely used term in public discourses, characterized by a broad range of meaning ascribed to an expectation associated with it. So despite the terminological and conceptual challenges associated with it, however, identity has gained the status of one of the most pervasive concepts to describe on political direct community building process, but also at a nation-state level. So in this context, two competing understandings of European identity and its repository can be distinguished. The first one, we can imagine Europe as a cultural community of shared values, or, on the second place, Europe as a political community of shared democratic practices. So, European policies aimed at fostering a collective transnational identity. The Europe for Citizens program, launched in 2006, pays tribute to historical remembrance and thus to the cultural dimension of European identity, but also put emphasis on active citizenship. So, a key role for the genesis of any European identity can be attributed to history and remembrance. I read this sentence and I find it very interesting because the question of remembrance and linked to the cultural issue can start a good and interesting debate here. So, challenging this concept, the underlying basis is, if European peoples cannot even agree on how to handle their past, how can they possibly find common ground in dealing with the present and tackling the future?
What really unites us, it's not only an inclusive poster directed to harmonization and compromise, but also the solidarity between ourselves. Just to sum up, my perception in terms of defense identity and behavior is that European Union pretends to affirm itself as a strong player in the world security environment rather than be a military alliance, and will pursue that goal, integrating all the cultural difference and historical difference and the common objectives of its member states.
Jaime, what do you think about this? Well, this is a real challenge, yes, or not?
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I think Europe is now facing several challenges, especially in terms of the way citizens and institutions aggregate their ideas in terms of a common sense. In my book that I published last year, following 10 years of collaboration with the newspaper New York, I spoke about the 5 I's. that I think summarize most of the problems that in fact Europe and its institutions and citizens face.
Angela, what do you think about this project we are doing? We are facing some difficulties in European identity, so this project is really important for all of us to understand more about ourselves and about other peoples of Europe. I will ask you to say some words about this.
Thank you, Cristina. The project was in fact born because I really couldn't understand all the nationalist movements. And I thought that Europe was facing a challenge which was a real danger to Europe. You as young people, you are familiar with the situation of peace and freedom. And I am really a little bit worried about the future of Europe and about peace and freedom. And if I take into account the very important fight you are struggling in order to keep the environment for future generations, I would also like to encourage you all to fight for Europe, which is to fight for peace and freedom. Why did we compose the project as it is? Because Finland has a border with Russia. And Russia in the current political situation is a player which is interesting and should be observed. So Finland was for me a very important part. Portugal, because Portugal just came out of a crisis, and I would like to learn how did Portugal manage to come out of this crisis? And as this project is not only about dangers, but also about fun, because working together in Europe across national borders and across all the borders of maybe various cultures is also fun. And I remember one sentence that your Prime Minister Socrates said when Portugal was in the middle of a crisis. We are willing to comply, but don't take our identity from us. And part of our identity is to go to a restaurant. And this was such a kind of a vivid culture that I wanted to include also Portugal to this project. And of course, Poland and Hungary, because some dangers can be observed in Poland and Hungary. They needed to be included in this project, definitely. And France and Germany as the study program, which is the source of this project, take part as a logical component of our study program and all the activities we have. And the aim was exactly to find out how far are we in creating a European identity
that contests the existence of European identity. The question is, and these words explain that it is very difficult to define Europe and the Europeans. But they also tell me something different. It tells me that, well, you are from different nationalities. I was told from Austria, Germany, Portugal, and we all feel like, I feel like Portuguese, you would feel like German and Austrian and Polish. But now imagine that you are in India, or in Africa, or in China, and that you are alone there. Probably you would feel not simply as German or Polish or Portuguese, you would feel also that you are Europeans. I do believe that there is a European identity.
In both occasions that I worked in the European defense environment, it showed me how similar and connected we are, and a little bit in the sequence of your presentation, and how easily we find a common way to communicate with each other, and how curious and tolerant we can be regarding our traditions and political views, and how we feel Europe as a how we feel part of Europe as a culture. I think the Defense European project has made more for the integration than the opposite.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a little question to all of you regarding, for example, the decision which was taken against Montenegro for 2 or 3 days ago, which refused to integrate it in the European Union or in the EU. What do you think about that act? And is it like a break for a development in the future? What do you think about that one?
I would like to ask my guests, what do you think about the European agenda on migration? What do you think the impact on daily basis, and of course in business scenarios too?
So regarding the number of participants involved, we truly believe that this is an outstanding instrument for creating European identity and citizenship apart from the local, the regional and the national identity. The impact of this program is very important because it places different nationalities together, working together with the same purpose, and the universities have to do the same job, so they have to communicate, to interact with each other through different programs, networks, to overcome several barriers, geographic, cultural, social, and we truly believe that this, as the most popular program in Europe, is very, very well successful.
Students, I have the $1 million question for you, and this is, how European are you? I would like to ask you, how European are you? Please take the microphone and tell me your opinion.
Hi to everyone. I was born in Portugal, but I feel a lot European, but I would say I consider myself an Earthian, so the world is my place. Due to a lot of conflicts between continents, countries, like the lieutenant said, it's an utopia to consider like the world a unified place. So we go to a minor scale, and it's Europe. By talking so much about Europe, we are separating the continents. We are not unifying the world. Like I said, it's an utopia. It's something. Maybe in a lot of years we will be talking about the world being united. When maybe we go to other planets and we have the United Nations of the world, and not Europe, America, Asia, and so on. So going to the question itself, I consider myself 100% European. I was raised with different cultures.
Hi, I would think this a little bit different way. If you think what people abroad in different countries think about Europe, for example, if there's American, they never go for a travel to Germany, to France, whatever. They come to Europe. They are traveling to Europe. So if you think what they think about us, or Asians think about us, they think that we are Europeans. So maybe we are getting some point to the point that we also think that we are Europeans. But if you ask any Americans, for example, where they are traveling to Europe. they just think it's like USA, it's similar than to Europe.
Actually, the United States somehow benefited from European values. Some of European ideals and values were later adopted at the United States. And I recommend the reading of a book, one of my favorite, a masterpiece, Democracy in America, by Alexis de Tocqueville. And actually, it's a French author that visits America after the French Revolution, and he is amazed by America. Why? Because the ideals of the French Revolution were adopted by the Americans, actually adopted the main ideas of the French Revolution. Well, what would the founding fathers of America say about current America, today's America, and some of these values? But actually, when you speak about European values, especially in the political arena, America duplicates, uses these values.
About what you said between America and the US, there is a very well-known program by Farid Zakaria, GPS. It's a well-known CNN program, and some weeks ago he had a program about the relation between the US and Europe. And some of the most thinkers that he had in that program, from MIT, from Harvard, and also from Washington, were very clear, telling that in fact there is a very strong commitment in American society about the values that Europe has, especially in terms of history and terms of identity. What I think it misses now, and this is of course most of the times political and strategic, is really understanding by the institutions from Europe and others from the US that this cooperation between the both poles of the world should be better.
Okay, so this is a very complex question in a very complex answer, because one of the things that we have seen during the time that the project's been going on is that there is a definite desire from the people that are participating to be Europeans. There's also some very core values that come from our countries. For example, the tardiness, in the sense that the Portuguese are always late and the Germans are always on time, and that kind of stuff. The fundamental core values are still there. They still exist. But the fact is that, for example, we the Portuguese, we drive German cars and French cars. We eat American food, and we wear clothes from other countries. And I guess the question isn't really how European are the Europeans, but how Earthian are the Europeans, like the other participant was saying, because we live in an extremely globalized world. So.
Thanks a lot for having this reflection on identity. I guess we need to distinguish between personal identity and social identity. As an individual and personal identity, you will perfectly be able to feel yourself as an inhabitant of this planet. However, social identity always requires at least two groups. One group which is familiar to you, and another group which is not as familiar to you, which does not mean that you are hostile against this other group. But social identity means I belong to a particular group and not to another group. Social psychological point of view, you can perfectly feel yourself as a Portuguese person and also as a European person. No problem about it. But to feel European, you perfectly need, for example, the United States, some Americans, in order to feel closer to one group than to another.
I could ask still one question, because not question, but in Finland, even though we are the most remote country who isn't here, from this Portuguese point, I think it's for Finnish people, at least I can say that Europeans is quite normal for us, because in Finland, in Scandinavia, we have this Scandinavia. Years before EU, we already have free movements. We shared the same values in Scandinavian countries, even though that Finland is maybe a little bit, because Scandinavia is more or less Norway, Denmark, Sweden, but of course Finland is also there. But we used to have same system years before. So it's like only just expanding. So I can think myself as a Finn, as a Scandinavian, and as a European. So it's...
Yeah, I've got a little question. It's my personal opinion, so I want your reaction about it. We talked about like integration zone, about how we are actually, who we are, and for example, we started speaking about global changing and climate change 22 years ago or 30 years ago, and now today we're acting. So we started acting like a few years ago. And I think like the Erasmus Plus program started, I think in 1986, if I'm right. So it started like a long time ago. So our parents could use Erasmus Plus, and they had like the first step of European integration, like exchanging to other countries. And I think our generation feels, for my part, because my background allows me, I think I feel much more international now, that I'm feeling European. I think we have got like open borders, we have got passports, which allows us to go like almost everywhere in the world now. That the world is so open that we can just enjoy by just buying a flight ticket. And
that I would like to put to our guests, because we are living in turmoil with Brexit, with migration, separatist movements in Europe. So economics and politics, are they really thinking on European identity terms? What do you think our representatives are doing? Are they doing a good job?
Brussels made in September a very good conference about the future of the European Union. And one of the topics that were more discussed there was the eventual need to reinvent the institutions and the organizations. I think that the way that the European Commission, the Parliament and the Council are articulating themselves is not the best one. And this was one of the conclusions of the conference. Because in fact we have a Parliament that has been reinforcing its powers during the last years, and its effect. For instance, this obligation of the President of the Commission and the Commissions to be evaluated in a plenary session is something that reinforces the power of the parliaments and the representatives of the states.
One of the things that separate an individual person from the European Union is that for a normal citizen, he's more connected with the politics of his country. He's more close to it. He has more information about it. He can take a part on it, or and in the opposite way. The political on European Union is in a distance, and that normal citizen doesn't see how his involvement will change or will have any influence on it.
I would like to point out that even though one can be very critical about the politicians, there are also some positive points which we might not see. And I would also like to point out that politicians in the European Parliament and in the European Commission have an extremely difficult job. They have to integrate all these difficult topics, and they have to integrate the different cultural accesses to these topics. So this is certainly obviously not simple.
There are proposals. For instance, what about creating a media, common media? And then you have obstacles because you have different languages. It's not so easy. It's not so easy to, when you transfer power to a higher level, to adapt democratic processes.
Well, I think we are going to end this event. I would like to thank everybody that stayed here until the end. Thank you so much for your participations. You are the future, so we are expecting a lot of you in this project, and of course as citizens of European Union. And of course I'm in a condition to say that Europe, we will rock you.